So wanted to ask a little bit about HP has been on this digital transformation journey. Can you tell us a little bit about where they're at now?
Absolutely. So, as you mentioned, many of you out there probably know HP for our printers and for our PCs, but which we enjoy, and thank you for buying those products. But the future growth for HP is in our ability to become more of a solutions-based and service-based company, probably like many companies. And that's very hard. That's going to be very difficult. But there are examples of some success. And one of the ones I like to point out to you is John Deere, is one of my favorite examples. I'm from Nebraska. I'm from the Midwest. I grew up thinking of John Deere as this really cool tractor company. But if you ask John Deere today, they would tell you they are not a tractor company. They are a services and solutions company. So their equipment today has automation in it. Some of those tractors are fully automated. They have sensors that are reading data from reading the soil and sending that data to the cloud, and they're looking out into the future and the forecast and the weather forecasts and bringing that back in real time and automatically like adjusting the fertilizer that gets in, mapping out their routes for everything. And so they are a solutions company, an example of that. So that's kind of what we're trying to do at HP now, is become one of those solutions company. And MDM, I think, is going to be a big part of that. So it's exciting time to be in MDM, and exciting time for us at HP as well.
Very nice. And can you speak a little bit more about the role of MDM in that transformation?
Yeah. So
the strategic objectives.
Yep. Absolutely. So right now, one of the things that we've done this year, for the first time ever, we have now launched a services organization at HP with its own P&L. Now, that services organization is focusing on workforce mobility primarily, but one of the key drivers for this is today HP is sort of seen as kind of a value company, right? And I think we're looking at around about $10 billion in our sales and solutions revenue, which is good. But we think if we can get that to about 30% of our overall revenue, we think that changes the perception from a value company to a growth company, right? You kind of grow your PE multiple, and then now that changes the dynamic of your innovation dollars and how you spend. And so that's sort of the North Star. That's kind of our compass of what we want to do with our solutions. And so now it's about how do we achieve that, right? And so we think MDM is sort of the engine that drives us to that North Star, to becoming a growth company, right? And unlocking some of that value. So MDM is the engine to that North Star. And so it's a matter of how do we unlock that and use that data strategy to support that company vision. So MDM is an exciting place. It's a key enabler, we think.
Yeah, absolutely. And so speaking of that, MDM technology is never in a vacuum. There's obviously a complex technology landscape at HP. And can you speak to us a little bit about the architectural decisions that you've had to make and what the implications of those architectural decisions were?
Yeah, so there was a data summit, I think, back in 2019, where we gave a presentation talking about laying the foundation for how we build out essentially that engine, that foundational component that will enable us to become this growth company. And I say that because it's important, because building that foundation has been a critical piece of our success and will be a critical piece of our success going forward. So when we started our MDM, when I started my MDM journey, it was a little tough going, but we teamed up with Realtio to bring an enterprise level solution for MDM. And then one of the other things that we've done is I used to joke that we have a lot of, the good news is we have a lot of ERP systems. The bad news is we have a lot of ERP systems. So we have all these regional ERP systems, and we also consolidated that to a single ERP SAP system, and some of you maybe have had this experience. There's this struggle that we found with managing master data in your SAP environment versus for us on our Realtio environment. And what we found is that if we basically emphasized all of the great things that SAP does in their space, and then we also emphasize the great things that we do in the enterprise space with our Realtio thing. So there's some things that SAP does very well. An example I talk about is SAP. We need to know when we're shipping products out, is a customer's warehouse open on the weekend, or maybe they're not open on the weekend. SAP can do that very well, right?
Right.
In our MDM space, we need to know, how can we identify a customer? How can we deliver that 360-degree view? Our Realtio environment does that very well. So we wanted to take advantage of those platforms. And then it was about making sure that they're integrated. And how do we have this seamless integration with these platforms? So for example, today when somebody now is in our ERP system and they're setting up, the customer is on SAP environment, that screen that they're seeing, that data that they're seeing is actually in real time coming from our Realtio environment. So they're actually using Realtio on the SAP environment. They really don't even know it. And then there's this back and forth that happens where with changes happen in our Realtio environment or changes happen in our SAP environment, that information flows back. For the most part, it's seamless, right? Because we built out this sort of service-based architecture that allows these now foundational components to talk to one another, which is really what MDM is. It's about getting systems to talk to one another. And then now recently we've just rolled out a second instance of Realtio, bringing in our company data along with our person data. So we've built this foundation that we think that sets us up for success going forward, becoming hopefully the solutions-based company.
Yeah, I'm curious at the outset with this really significant investment in SAP, was there a little bit of an internal debate about whether to consolidate onto one system, or tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so there was a lot of arguments, as you can imagine, because we spent a lot of money in consolidating SAP. Why can't we just put everything in there? And like I said, it was really convincing folks that there are things it does well, and there's things that our Realtio environment does well. And we were able to prove those things out. That was the nice thing about having that foundation. We could kind of go and do some proof of concepts to show what we could do and the capabilities we can bring. And then it kind of became a no-brainer. And so now it's clearly we utilize both of them and take advantage of those architectures.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I know that was obviously a multi-year journey, but can you speak a little bit about the first use cases where you focused on the Realtio MDM?
Yeah, so for us, it was 2017 was our implementation. In fact, I've got some metrics here that will show where we came. But when we started in 2017 with our implementation, our company was going through a split. And so previously to that, we spent, I call it the 80-20 rule. So 80% of at least my time and our time was, focusing on operational issues, like fighting fires, right? We need to get more performance. Do we change this from a char to a varchar? What's the cardinality of this? Should we bring more CPUs in? Like all these conversations about how do we maximize our performance. And that was it. That consumed all of our time. And now we were looking at bringing in Realtio in a SaaS solution. At that time in 2017, migrating your master data to the cloud at that time was basically unheard of. So they thought we were a little bit crazy, first of all, that you want to go to the cloud with this company that they hadn't heard of at the time. Yeah. And we were promising three things. We were promising that we were going to get better performance out of it. The environment was going to become more stable. And then the third most important thing is that we're going to be spending now 80% of our time on talking about innovation and maybe 20% of our time doing the operations work. So that was sort of the what we had promised. And the nice thing is that that's essentially has kind of come to fruition. So like I said, we're probably about 7 years now removed from our Realtio transition, and we now are in an environment where we have performance is extremely important to us. We have hundreds of millions of records in our B2B environment and close to 1 billion records in our B2C environment. Performance is extremely important, and yet with all of that data, things are actually performing at scale better than what we had in our previous environment. And now we're in the situation where we spend maybe 20% of our time. We still talk about some of the operational issues. We still talk about performance here, and that's obviously very important, but it's only maybe 20% of our time doing that. And we truly now are able to spend 80% of our time being innovation focused. And that has really changed the game for us. I think this morning, some people heard Bill talk about, data is the new oil, right? So,
Yes.
so for us, the way we think of it, data for a solutions-based company, we think of printers as our product, we think as, PCs as our product, but in the solutions-based company, data is our product, right? So how do we utilize that data going forward?
Yeah, I'd love for you to provide an example of that, actually, because people do think, oh, HP has delivered their printer to a place and that's the end of our journey. But tell us a little bit about what that services orientation is actually like.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll and I'll talk about this here in a little bit. So one of the things that this enabled for us, which was great, is and I'll give an example of why I talked a little about the foundation, and that's sometimes the foundational stuff can be boring, right? It's not that exciting, but the reason why it is so critical is, I'll give an example. About a few years back ago, our global head of sales operations, this was during the early kind of stages of the pandemic, and we were having supply chain issues. It was taking forever to get these products to our customers, and he came to us and said, look, I'm getting involved in all of these escalations because not only is it taking forever to get our products out the door, but it was taking us up to 8 days to get them set up on our systems to even place the order. So there was an additional delay on top of that, and he said, what can we do to fix this problem? So we were at the table, being able to discuss this problem with him. And then so we met with his team, we looked at what was going on, we was like, okay, what can we do to try to automate this and bring this down? Mm-hmm. And then ultimately, we executed on a plan that delivered a solution that brought us down from this 8-day turnaround period. Just late last year, we went worldwide with this solution. We were able to automate about 80% of those things, leveraging our foundational capabilities, and we got that from 8 days down to 1 day turnaround time. And so that is an example of why if the foundation wasn't there, we wouldn't even have had the conversation or had the chance to even do something about it. So that's why the foundation is important, because I think it takes you out of the basement, puts you at a more strategic level where you're having these conversations, with the executives across the company. In fact, I just had a call last night with the director of our MDM team. She actually had a call with our COO, essentially our COO, and they were talking about all the things we're doing here. And he actually had just notified us that he wants to give the MDM team more investments so we can do more of these things. So this foundational stuff it's kind of boring and it takes a while. It took us years to kind of build some of that stuff out, but now we kind of have this strategic seat at the table, and it's kind of why I joined the team. It's pretty exciting stuff.
Yeah, you've mentioned that the business conversations have really changed because you went from spending 80% of your time trying to fix performance issues to now 80% of the time really innovating in partnership with the stakeholders.
Yes.
That's really transformative, and especially at the scale of HP. Can you tell us a little bit more about what's changed in your approach now that you're really embarked on this path, and what does that look like today?
Yep. Yeah. So the other conversation, it's changed our conversations a lot, right? One of the things I kind of talk about is Conway's Law, and Conway's Law kind of talks about kind of the way you're organized. It has an impact on your behavior. It has an impact on the conversations and how you communicate. And because we have this organization where we can sit down and truly listen and communicate with our business, we now, as we're looking at the solutions business, we're having these conversations with them, more these kind of strategic conversations, like, okay, how can we enable this data to make our service and solutions, companies, how can we make them successful? And one of the things we realize is these conversations is, in our current approach, we basically load a ton of data into our MDM system. It's this massive database, right? Hundreds and hundreds of millions of records. It's this massive database, just kind of loaded in there, and it kind of stays there for a while. And after talking with our solutions team, we kind of went back, and they told us, this is the kind of data and the capabilities they're looking for. And we went back and looked at our system, and we realized about 80% of the data that was in our system was essentially not utilized. And so only about 20% of the data had a high value. And so we said, okay, we want these capabilities that the services team is looking for. We want to add those into the system, but it was prohibitive because of this huge overhead of this data, this volume. So now we're looking at, okay, we're going to reduce down to that 20%, and then we're going to grow that data so that we can enable those capabilities for our services team. So, we're looking at changing our data model a little bit. So for folks who might be familiar with the graph principles, they're going to be using some graph principles because instead of, like I said, dumping all this data into a system, we say we focus on the relationships. That's kind of what we're realizing with our services team, because in order to have a solution, you have to understand all the different touch points and the relationships that a customer has. And so that's sort of a pivot for us now going forward to say, let's change our model a bit, let's change our approach and focus on those data relationships. And again, because we can kind of have those conversations, we can understand what their needs are and have the agility to actually do something about it. We're excited. We have that seat at the table with our strategic initiatives, and it's a good spot to be in.
Yeah, just to play back what you said, I think in terms of really recognizing the 20% of the data that's truly high value, and then really building rich profiles of that data. So it's a very different approach from what I'm hearing than before, where it was very wide, but it was just some of it was low value, and it was really hard to tell what's what.
Yeah, it goes back to maybe this morning you talked about the data strategies. What's your data strategy? Your data strategy needs to align to your business objectives, and that's what it was for us, is realizing, maybe at one point it aligns, but going forward it wasn't aligning that much anymore, so we had to make a pivot and make a change, and that's okay. That's what you need to do to stay ahead, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so tell us a little bit about what's ahead for HP.
So I think about all what we've done sometimes, and it's amazing what we've done. But then I always feel like we're behind. We're so far behind. There's so much work we have to do. We're never going to get caught up, And that's okay. That's always going to be the case. But that's what kind of makes this exciting. So when we look ahead into the future, when I think of MDM, to me MDM is essentially So at HP, we've got a lot of silos. I'm sure many of you out there, probably a similar situation. You got a lot of silos, all these different federated systems out there. And I guess our approach has been, let's embrace that, right? So there's going to be, printer team's going to do the printer team thing. PC team's going to do their thing. Marketing's going to do their thing. But how can we communicate, how can we collaborate across all of these systems? And to me, MDM is how these systems can collaborate. It's the language that all of these systems can use to talk to one another, right? So when we talk about these seamless experiences, having the customer in the middle and all these different touch points, MDM is the language that brings all this together. And that's a pretty powerful tool to have, is to bring that kind of collaboration. So when we're looking ahead to all of the things that we're trying to do at HP, so we've got some pretty cool stuff coming down the road. We have, for example, we're working with a bottling company, so we're taking our print capabilities and essentially, how can we print a container, possibly replacing a plastic container or maybe like a lipstick container. How do we take that printing capability and having an eco-friendly container, right? We're looking at, there's these robotic devices that we're looking at that will be at a construction site, and it's almost like a mobile printer. So you're going to have a little robot running around a construction and printing on things. And then we also have, we're working with some medical device companies to do some diagnostics. So like when we print today, we take the ink and we run it through our circuits and we print something out on a paper. Well, we can take that same approach with maybe your breath or your saliva, run it through our circuits, and at the end, have a cheap, effective way, hopefully, to do a diagnostic. So we're teaming up with some folks to do that. On the AI front, everybody's asking about AI. So a lot of the compute power today has to happen on the cloud. So we'll be putting some of that into the devices so we can share. So there's so much happening, and we now have kind of that seat at the table. We're out of the basement, and I couldn't be in a better spot. I love what we're doing. I love the future that we have, and so I'm glad that I can be out here and hearing what everyone here has been doing. I'm so amazed at all the stuff that's happening out there, and so MDM it's a fun place. So far, it's been a pretty fun place.
You made a very enlightened choice years ago to embark on this, and I think, just to echo back, some of these innovations and new areas are really exciting. It's probably safe to say that none of it would have come about if 80% of the resources were still tied up on trying to shore up the performance of the systems, right?
I wouldn't be here now, right, if that weren't the case. So yes, yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Great. I guess any last words of advice for this audience, because you've been on this transformation journey for several years now and are really seeing the fruits come through. So any advice for those who may be a little bit earlier in their journey?
You've probably heard from other folks, focus on the business outcomes, right? I mean, what are you doing to drive business value? What are you doing to bring business outcomes? I think you do that, and you will set yourselves up for success. Yep.
Thank you so much, Chad. We wanted to see if there's questions in the audience. We need a mic here on that side. Thank you.
Hi, Chad. Thank you for sharing. That was fascinating. I had a question regarding your metrics slide. Was that all loaded into the MDM or other data tools?
Yes, it is. It is all of that is loaded in our Realtio environment. So we have about 400 in our B2B environment and 1 billion in our B2C environment. And so, scale is huge, and as you can imagine, the performance is critical there. But thanks to kudos to Realtio, right? We were able to deliver on that performance and stability. So it's allowed us to move ahead. But yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
We'll get that rectified. Sorry. There's another question here in the center.
Was consent management part of the MDM use case?
I'm sorry, was what?
Consent management, like with John Doe buying so many products, they might be saying, yeah, I want to receive an email, phone, at what time, like the consent management part.
Yeah, so like I said, our original approach is we kind of just loaded a bunch of data into our system. So we've got a lot of silos. So what that means is we've got a lot of MDM systems, so to speak, especially in our consumer space. So in our consumer space, basically every system is sort of running their own version of an MDM. And so we were loading all this data into our system. And this is kind of when we realized, like, we can't be all things to all people. This is not going to work. So let's embrace the fact that there's multiple MDM systems out there. No problem, right? So Print has their customer, PC has their customer. What we don't have is an HP consumer, right? So that's what we focused on, is like, let's have the basic core information that we can use to identify who the customer is. And then kind of going back to some of those graph principles, what we wanted to do is focus on the relationships on the rest of the data. So if the customer support team came in and said, hey, I need certain information, but we didn't have it, but we knew that information was with the Print team, we could then link the customer support team back to the Print team or the PC team or whatever team they needed to go get that data, so that we kind of have a federated model in that approach. And that's why we kind of doubled down on focusing on the relationship. So we master the relationship data, so that if whoever needs that information, we can go find it. Essentially, it was our approach to that problem right now. Good question.
There's one question here in the center.
Thank you, Chad, for this. You mentioned about 400 million profiles and 1 billion profiles. Is that the consolidated profile number or the number of profiles that you brought into that system before consolidation? Follow-up question on that. Mm-hmm. Were you able to achieve the 100% match and merge in the consolidation because we are having some issues on the last mile. Last 2% of 100 million is a lot. How did you address that kind of challenge?
Yeah, so it was consolidated profiles is what that represents, and what we did when we were implementing with our Realty implementation, we actually we created a separate instance. As a couple of things, we created a separate instance, and all that instance did was focus on our match rules. So today we use rule-based matching. That's something we're going to want to change, go to ML-based matching, but we're using rule-based matching. And we created a dedicated environment where we could really focus on the matching. And then, we had, what's the deviation that we're looking for that's acceptable, right? And then when we were finished with those rules, we then loaded them back into our environment, and then from there, we continue to manage those rules base. So that's, and because of the volume, we don't really have any manual reviews. We do some, but for the most part, it's 100, almost 99.9% automated for the matching. But yeah, that's all consolidated profiles. It's a lot of work. Matching it's a lot of work, but it's how we identify it's a critical component for how we identify the customer for us, and we're always looking for ways for improvement there. But it's so far it's worked fairly well. It works well. It's not perfect, but it works well. Yeah.
We have time for one more question. Great questions from everyone.
For the relationships, how did you decide what entities to bring in from a data perspective and how to create those relationships? How did you scope that?
Yep. Yeah. So we knew we can't boil the ocean. We can't do all the relationships. So we're starting in kind of our first use case was with our customer support team. So we looked at, so our customer support team is currently in the process of, and I'm sure all of us have had nightmares with customer support, right? We're no different. So our customer support team really has an agenda to bring automation into the customer support, especially with AI and some chat capabilities. They're looking into all of that capabilities. But to do all of that, they need the data, right? So working with our customer support team, we're looking at what are the key relationships that we need and to build out that model and see how it works. We just started launching that this year. About 6 months ago was our first phase of that, and so far it's been successful. It's a different approach looking at the relationships, but we kind of start small, work with somebody who it's motivated. The customer support team was also very motivated to work with us, and then we're going to have to pick and choose, right? This is something we realize going forward. We're going to have to pick and choose and sort of prioritize, going back to what's the value we're trying to go for, and then focus on what our overall value is for the company, and then that's kind of what we'll focus on. Yeah.
Please join me in thanking Chad for this really excellent presentation.
Yeah, thank you.